Should Baker Mayfield be in the MVP conversation? That and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into this WTSP Wednesday episode of Locked On Bucs, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listener view every day. Don't forget you can subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And, of course, you can follow along on Twitter. I am James Yarcho at JYarcho_Bucs. He is Evan Klosky at eKlosky WTSP. We are your credentialed members of the media covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I am the editor-in-chief of the 813.tv. And, of course, Evan is on 10 Tampa Bay and at 10tampabay.com. You can catch the show every Monday through Friday along with the everydayers. And for that, I want to share my appreciation for your continued support of the show. One of the ways you can support the show is become a Locked On Bucs insider. You're going to get news, rumors, updates, general thoughts, one-on-one conversations with me via text message, no ads or anything like that. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes to become an insider today. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you're going to get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Taking a look at the defense and getting Evan's take on whether or not the Bucs should be in that contender conversation. That's coming up in a little bit, but let's start with your take on the Bucs win over the Saints on Sunday. So things started off great. They got real shaky there for, 15 minutes of game time. Then the Bucs absolutely shut things down in the second half. Is this the best game that the Buccaneers have played all season, despite that second quarter implosion in all three facets?
I don't know, because the second quarter implosion was historic implosion. Like, that was maybe the worst quarter of football I have ever seen, and that includes college football. No, it just, you think back to the Eagles win. That was pretty easy breezy, dominant. Even the Commanders game, full in control in that one. Coming off of Atlanta and imploding in the fourth quarter to then go into New Orleans and have another quarter where they imploded. Luckily, they did it. Luckily they gave themselves a cushion and had a second half to return to the game versus Atlanta, where they didn't give themselves any time to recover. I just don't know if I can say that's the best game from them, but it certainly had some of the best elements we have seen from the team. It's just, it's a four-quarter game, so I can't just say, let's eliminate a quarter and say it's the best game, because 15 minutes is imperative to the process. But I think three of the quarters played in New Orleans were some of the three best that we've seen from this team.
Well, and on one side, you can even say, even with that second quarter, and you brought it up perfectly, because I was going to if you didn't. You had that implosion against the Falcons. So the Bucs could have had that, oh, crap, it's happening again moment. And instead, they overcame the really bad quarter, and then everything was going right. The offense was clicking. The defense was dominant. So I think when you take that into account, that they didn't roll over and die the way we've seen a lot of Buccaneers teams do in the past, it lends credence to what this team really is, how they're built, how much they believe in their coaching and their leadership and all that stuff. So I do think that plays into it a little bit. But another part that plays into it is Baker Mayfield. We have to talk about Baker Mayfield, because he leads the NFL in touchdowns, both passing touchdowns and total touchdowns. He's top 10, even top 5 in most quarterback metrics. Should Baker Mayfield be getting more attention when it comes to the MVP conversation across the NFL?
I think so. I absolutely think so. This isn't a year where offenses are reigning supreme, right? There's only a handful of offenses that are really having a ton of success at a consistent level. The Buccaneers are one of those teams. And considering, I think Baker Mayfield's over-under on the Hard Rock app for touchdowns this year was 23.5, and he's at 15 right now. He's on his way, barring health, to one of his best seasons, if not the best seasons ever in the NFL. And, the MVP discussion is going to pick up steam or decrease in steam based on these next 4 games where they're playing 3 teams that were in conference championship games. But considering what he already did against one team that was in a conference championship game, if you compare that up, with the other 3 plus the Falcons, which is essentially for the NFC South. I know it's going to be like a week 8 game, but you go 0-2 against the Falcons. They go 3-0 in the NFC South. You're probably not winning the division. So that's just the reality of it. And but I think that Baker has won the eye test, the stats, the publicity will be strong for him. He's a likable fella. So I for sure think that that's not a hyperbolic conversation. I don't know if he's won right now, but to me, he's on the list.
Well, and I saw something that Carmen Vitale, Bucs fans know her very well. She had shared on X where they were doing that player A versus player B comparison, and it had player A with 17 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, 1,615 yards, almost a 71% completion percentage, 109.4 rating. Player B was 12 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, almost 2,000 total yards, 67% completion percentage, a 108.4 rating. And, Carmen sniffed it out really quickly. She goes, A is Baker Mayfield. Like, you're not going to sneak that past me. And then player B was Lamar Jackson. So we're talking about the guy that's going to be coming to town on Monday. A 2-time MVP. The Ravens are, really starting to click. But when you take a look at who's more valuable to their team, and that's what the MVP is supposed to be, Baker is more valuable to the Bucs than I think Lamar Jackson is to the Ravens right now because of the impact that Derrick Henry's had.
Yeah, but that, as much as we want that conversation to be a part of the discussion, I've never seen it as a factor. People, I'm not saying you're wrong. I just don't think that that's ever going to be the main thing. That's never won in any argument with voters. So that's sort of the tough part about that. I agree with you. It's just if Lamar Jackson has all these stats and they're a 12, 13-win team and Baker Mayfield has his stats and they're a 9-win team, you're probably not going to win the award. That's just right. That's just the nature of it. So this will be good to, you got to get to at least 10 wins, I feel like, if that's even going to be a thought. So considering that the back half of their schedule is a little bit more favorable than their front half, certainly the next month, I think that we're going to learn a lot about Baker Mayfield and the potential hardware that could come his way at the end of the season. But, who cares about any of that stuff anyway? As long as he performs the way that he's performing, Buccaneers fans are going to be just A-okay with the trajectory of this team.
Yeah, well, and we're going to talk about the next month of the season a little bit later. But coming up next, the defense showed us some good, some great, and some really, really ugly. That is next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals that you cannot find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users do not visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. And LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the process easier. They even launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. It's the easiest, most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports because unlike other apps on PrizePicks, it's just you against the numbers. You can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. It's the only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy so that your lineups stay in play even if one of your players leaves in the first half and doesn't return. PrizePicks puts their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When my picks hit, I can get my money in as quickly as 15 minutes. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL, all lowercase, all one word, to get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONNFL on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every single day. Everydayers, make sure you are coming back tomorrow. It's a crossover Thursday. I'll be joined by Locked On Ravens host Kevin Ostreicher. Always have a great time talking with him, so it should be a really fun show. In the meantime, the new Locked On NFL is here. Locked On NFL is now 2 shows every day. First, the madman Tyler Rowland kicks off your morning with a double shot of NFL espresso. Then stop by the barbershop with Tony Wiggins for some real NFL talk. Add in the Locked On local experts. You're going to get unprecedented NFL insight, hot opinions, detailed breakdowns, all in 30 minutes. It's the new Locked On NFL, and it's twice a day. So make it your second listen at Locked On NFL on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. The Bucs defense struggled against the Falcons in a big way. Had an implosion in the second quarter against the New Orleans Saints before getting things together for a really dominant second half. 3 sacks, 2 interceptions, countless pressures. You have Zion McCollum continuing to get better. You have Tyke Smith and Logan Hall, improving each and every week and becoming really important parts of this defense. Cansey and Hemfield are both back. Was that second half performance more of what the Bucs defense is going to be moving forward? Or do you think they still have too many holes or too many lingering issues to really be that dominant down the stretch for the rest of the year?
It's a nuanced conversation because, one, and I want to say this, I don't blame the defense for the implosion. Okay, there was a penalty filled drive which led to a punt that was very short and led, Rashid Shaheed took it to the house. So the punt returned for a touchdown, and then Mayfield threw 3 interceptions, not really helping the defense very much there when you give the Saints short field to score. So I understand they want to hold them to 3. They could have done better 100%, but that was almost all on the offense with a nice cherry on top from the special teams. The defensive performance was amazing in the second half, probably the best we've seen, maybe compared to what we also saw with Philly. Obviously, when they're able to get pressure on the quarterback, good things happen. Do I know that's going to be the standard moving forward? I'm not 100% sure. Spencer Rattler in his first start, I don't know why it took Todd Bowles forever to dial up the blitzes against him, but New Orleans is also super injured on its offensive line. It was a recipe for a disaster, and Bowles cooked in the second half. Finally said, screw it. Enough with this soft zone crap, and I'm going to just send pressure to a QB that's not used to seeing that kind of stuff. And maybe that was a reminder, Todd, of you can amp it up a little bit. Stop playing it so safe. Stop being so afraid of some of the guys out there maybe not being exactly what you like, and push a damn button. So I'm hoping maybe that got him back into his bag of tricks, his bag of pressures. But having Cansey back, having Winfield back, very important. Certainly Cansey, once we get Diaby, Cansey, Vita rolling here, I'm really curious to see if those 4-man pressures start hitting. like they did against the Saints, that would be a huge, huge deal for Todd Bowles and this defense. Also, you heard Zion McCollum after the game say having Antoine Winfield Jr. is huge back there because he was playing aggressive over the top, which allowed Zion to play aggressive underneath, which is why he attributed the interception in part to what Antoine Winfield Jr. was doing, getting him into that spot. So I think there's a lot of good. You don't have Jamel Dean. I'm extremely fearful of the coverage linebacker. KJ Britt ain't it. And you're about to play a Ravens team that has Isaiah Likely and Mark Andrews. So good luck covering 2 tight ends. This team can barely cover 1. Juwan Johnson was lighting them up. So there are that coverage linebacker position is the most notable hole right now. And that's saying a lot considering, I spent the entirety of the offseason complaining about having a true edge rusher who can win one-on-one. But I don't know. And not to mention, they still are bleeding yards on their rushing defense. Nobody's challenging them enough running the ball. They are giving up yards. Yards per carry has not been great. It's not been a Todd Bowles like run defense. Maybe it'll be a little bit better when they get a little healthier. But I think it's still a little bit touch and go. I need more information. Kalijah's getting the rust off. Worried about the linebacker. Funderburk's going to get more time. Izian's out. Antoine has got to shake the rust off as well. So there's still a lot of question marks, which aren't necessarily me prognosticating what it's going to be like all year. It's just these injuries added up, and it's going to take a while for me to actually know what they look like until we see it.
Well, yeah, and you bring up the run defense. That's something I talked about on yesterday's show. Usually when the Bucs face Derrick Henry, it's okay, no big deal. The Bucs are top 5 in run defense in the NFL, but it was always just Derrick Henry. This isn't Will Levis and Ryan Tannehill at quarterback that's going to be playing against them. So it adds a whole new facet. And if Baltimore wants to ground and pound, they're probably going to find a lot of success. And something else that you and I talked about way back, really when the roster was the initial 53-man roster was announced, was how many times we're going to see 6 DBs on the field for this team. And I think we were getting close to that given KJ Britt's performance against the Falcons, which you and I never really got to talk about because of everything going on down there. And I kind of figured, look, on these sure passing downs, they were already pulling KJ Britt off the field for Servassier Dennis. Now, why wouldn't Bowles, pull KJ for, Christian Izian or another defensive back to be out there? But Izian's out. Dean is out. How is that going to affect and I realize Jamel Dean has not been having a great season, but those are still 2 pretty important parts of your secondary because now you're relying on Tyreek Funderburk, who played decently, but how big of a loss are Dean and Izian going up against this Ravens team?
Yeah, it's, certainly Dean. I like Funderburk as a long-term stash developmental project. I think he's got a lot of tools. As far as covering a guy, that I think is the easy part. But you saw he had his eyes in the wrong place on that touchdown in that game. There's, how to play the run as well. That's a whole different skill set, right? Think about Zion McCollum, his rookie year. And I think he made his first start against the Ravens on Thursday night, and it was not pretty. Mm-hmm. And, right, we liked Zion McCollum's attributes then, but you need the reps. You need work. And so it's not going to just happen right away. You can't necessarily do everything you want to do. And I'm not saying that Jamel Dean is very up and down. Some days he looks like he's one of the best cornerbacks in the league. The other day he looks like he shouldn't even be rostered. It's a very frustrating experience. I know fans deal with that and yell about that all the time, but he's still a very good player. And he doesn't make a lot of boneheaded mistakes. So not having him, it's really tough to run a dime package when you need a lot of secondary pieces to work in concert with each other, because there's even more, there's even a slimmer margin for error when going into that dime package. And it's tough to go dime against a guy like Derrick Henry, who is a monstrosity of a human, and he's going to roll over dudes who are 190 pounds, right? So I think that dime package is just waiting for maybe more of a pass-heavy team. You weren't necessarily worried about Spencer Rattler. I would say maybe circle back to that dime discussion against Atlanta, even though they have a formidable rushing attack as well. I think that would be the thought process there.
All right. Well, we are going to get Evan's take on a question that one of the listeners sent in. That is next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs. NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. And you're going to get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. The Buccaneers are 3.5-point home underdogs to the Baltimore Ravens with an over-under of 48.5, but they still trail the Atlanta Falcons in the odds to win the NFC South. The Falcons are the favorites at -170, while the Bucs sit at +175. If you want to get started on the action a little early this week, the Denver Broncos are 2.5-point road favorites as Sean Payton returns to New Orleans to take on the Saints with an over-under of 36.5. Get started this week with your $200 in bonus bets just for placing a $5 bet at FanDuel.com. That's FanDuel.com. Wrapping things up here on a WTSP Wednesday episode of Locked On Bucs, and no crystal ball in this one. We are just too far out from the game, but we're going to have Evan's predictions coming up on Monday's final preview episode in one way, shape, or form. But I wanted to get your take, Evan, on a question that was sent in from Demon Hunter on YouTube. He dropped this during the live chat in the post game, and I talked about it on my show yesterday. I'm curious where you stand because we've talked about this once before. You and I were on different sides of the aisle, but I was asked if the Bucs were officially contenders after that win on Sunday, and my answer was no for a couple of reasons, mostly with questions on the defensive side of the ball. I'm guessing you're there with me that they aren't contenders for a championship, but still a playoff team as things stand now. Was that a pretty fair guess?
Yeah. And,
all right.
And, I've the way that I felt about this team entering the season is kind of the way that I feel now. I actually think the depth is a little bit strong. I was happy with the depth entering the season. I think I'm a little bit happier with it now that we're in the season, but still, there are just some holes. And you wonder, like, a team like the Niners or something, it's just they don't have as many, even though I know like them and Detroit just lost Aiden Hutchinson, and it all stacks up. It's just let's see how they do against these guys, and this is going to be a real test.
And that's exactly what this was leading to. My question, Evan, beyond are they contenders, because you and I are right there together, is what do the Bucs need to do over the next 4 games? You host the Ravens, you host the Falcons, you're on the road at Arrowhead against the Kansas City Chiefs, then you host the San Francisco 49ers. What do they need to do that would make you go into their bye week saying, okay, this team can legitimately contend for a championship?
Man, I mean, they'll turn some heads if they go 3-1 on that stretch. I think they only need to go 2-2. And honestly, if it were me, I would punt this Ravens game. I know it's prime time. I know it's everybody coming together. It's going to be a little bit of an emotional affair considering everything that happened this past week. But the Ravens game does not matter. Your season to win the division is next week. That game matters. And the Falcons, if you beat the Falcons, at minimum, they're going 1-1 in 2 weeks. And if you lose to the Ravens and you beat the Falcons, at minimum, you're going 1-1. So you're both tied at the division right now. If you get through next week and you beat the Falcons, you're tied still. They're 2-1 in the South. You're 1-1. You're 2-1 as well. And you got the whole season ahead of you right now with that division title still in your full control. But if you lose week 8 at home in the creamsicles against the Falcons, you are not in control of the division. Forget about taking another loss, which will probably bump you back even more against them, who's obviously getting a win on you. If they win, that's 2 wins. They got the tiebreaker on you, and they just beat you twice. So, to me, you punt the Ravens. You go all in studying on the Falcons, coming up with the best game plan you got. And then between the Chiefs and the Niners, you gotta really kind of focus on, once again, you probably care more about the Niners than the Chiefs game, but you just got to win one of those. So, there might be some added juice going to Arrowhead on a Monday night, playing against that team with that sort of defense. But yeah, that my focus right now is honestly going 1-1. And I don't care what happens to the Ravens game. If they win it, awesome. You got to beat the Falcons. So that's where my head's at. If they would have won that Thursday night football game, different discussion. But they didn't. They screwed it up. So now you got to make amends for it, and you got to play a lot better than whatever the hell we watched in the fourth quarter of that game. So, and it'll be a little bit healthier too. And I think the Falcons, to a degree, will be a little bit healthier as well.
Yeah, and that's kind of along the same lines of what I said. They could be in that legitimate contender conversation if they go 2-2, depending on how that 2-2 comes about. They go 3-1, they're in that conversation. If they're 4-0, they're 100% in that conversation. But you're 100% right, and I think a lot of Bucs fans kind of get lost. I mean, not just Bucs fans, any football fan gets lost in the week-to-week moments where you're just focused on making sure that your team wins that week. But if the Bucs are going to go 2-2, you have to beat the Falcons. And then if you can choose another win, it's going to be the 49ers, because at the end of the day, those AFC games are pretty much going to get tossed. It's going to be more important to win those NFC matchups, especially against the Falcons. Because, after the bye, the Bucs still get the Panthers twice, and then they get the Saints in the final week of the season. So that's going to be huge. You fall to 0-2 against the Falcons and 1-2 in the division, when the Falcons would then be sitting at 4-1 in the division at that point, 3-1.
Well, no,
if they lose to the Falcons, then the Falcons are 3-0 or 4-0 in the division.
The Saints, they beat the Panthers, and then they would have beat the Bucs twice. It would have been 4-0.
Yeah, you're not going to overcome that, and so now you're needing.
Might as well just focus on the wild card at that point.
Yeah, because you're going to need a ton of help just to get above them in the win-loss record, so division doesn't come down to it. So, I'm with you 100%. You take a look at this Ravens game. Yeah, it'll be a blast if they win, and we're all going to have fun on the YouTube live, chatting about it and everything. But you have the most important matchup of the season to this point coming up next week. And Evan, those creamsicles have not been kind to the Bucs over the past couple times they've worn them.
Should have picked a different game to do that.
Yeah, well, they picked a bad game for it last year too. They picked the Lions.
Yeah,
you were coming out of the bye, but still,
it made sense historically speaking.
It did. But yeah, those I know that there's one listener in particular that will be blowing up my phone complaining about the creamsicles and how awful they are. Shout out to Matt from Morven, Georgia. But that is by far the most important game. as far as the Ravens are concerned, if there's one thing that the Bucs need to do to make sure that they're going to come out with a win, I mean, it could be offensively, it could be defensively. What are you focused on if you're the Bucs in order to finally beat Lamar Jackson?
Yeah, I think that you simplify the game plan, stop the run, and try to take away the tight end. Like you got to contain Lamar in the pocket. They're going to run the heck out of the ball with Derrick Henry. They're going to go to play action and try to find their tight ends. And I know that Lamar Jackson just popped off the last game. If Zay Flowers beats you, he beats you. I'm not letting Derrick Henry beat me, and I'm not letting these tight ends beat me. I know that's what they want to do. I know I am very vulnerable against a tight end. I'm just thinking of how do I stop that, and then if Lamar tees off on me, throwing 30-yard darts, tip of the cap. I see why you want some MVPs. Have a great season. We'll see you down the line, hopefully.
Best of luck in your future endeavors.
Yes, exactly. So, and then offensively speaking, Baltimore, excellent against a run. Do not imagine you're going to see. By the way, I completely undersold my Sean Tucker bowl prediction, but yeah, I should have made him my player of the game as well. But I'm glad at least my bold one worked. But
virtual high five here because we both got our bold predictions right. I think that might be the first time that's ever happened that you and I both got the bolds right.
We'll take that. Mark it down, write it down, because it's probably not going to happen again. But yeah, you're probably not going to see as potent of a running game from the Buccaneers this week. If you have players who are banged up and kind of teetering on the edge, let's say like a Mike Evans, maybe you give him the week off. Like that's honestly how much I'm focused on week 8. But they don't have a great secondary. They are very susceptible against the pass. As good as they are against a run, they're not that good against a pass. So if you're Liam Cohen, dial it up all day, every day, pass, and do what teams usually do against the Bucs and just abandon the run right out of the gates. I know that's a silly thing to say. A lot of football people out there will be like, that's dumb. I get it, but I see it all the time against the Buccaneers. Teams don't even try, and they just bulldoze you, or they bulldoze that team for yards, just chopping wood. So that's that. I mean, my thought process is out of the gates, throw the ball a ton, make sure you stop the run, and then figure out how to limit everything else after that. So that's kind of my 1 and 2. On that Thursday night football game a couple of years ago, the game most notably known for Shaq Barrett getting hurt, tearing his Achilles. If I remember that game correctly, they did an excellent job of limiting Lamar in that rushing attack in the first half. Actually, Baltimore came out and threw the ball a ton. They overthought it, and then in the second half, just ran the ball down Tampa Bay's throats and just bulldozed them to smithereens in that second half. So that's just my takeaways.
All right. Well, Evan, what do we have on tap over there on 10 Tampa Bay? And
we finally have the blitz again coming back this weekend. Holy smokes. It took 3 weeks, a big expletive words to the hurricanes that came through. A big thank you to, our 10 Tampa Bay team. I was involved in coverage. David was involved with Hurricane Helene. So we had to hit the pause button. There were things more important. Resources had to go elsewhere, but we will preview this matchup against the Ravens Monday night. We'll have it on Sunday at 8:30, 10 Tampa Bay, and that's okay if you can't pick up 10 Tampa Bay. We'll have it on our YouTube page, our 10 Tampa Bay YouTube page on Saturdays. That usually pops up there in the afternoon, evening time. And then also you can hit up our 10 Tampa Bay Plus app and watch it from there as well. So we got that. The Lightning, they're underway. They just won their home opener. They won their first 2 games. Andrei Vasilevsky looks like he's Timothy again. Looking amazing to start the season. So excited to have hockey back in our lives. And that's kind of what we got cooking. And then again, you can hit me up at eCloskey WTSP with whatever questions you got.
All right. Well, thank you all for joining this episode once again. Please make sure that you are following everything on Twitter at Locked On Bucs, at JArco_Bucs, at eCloskey WTSP. Check out everything that Evan's doing on 10 Tampa Bay at 10tampabay.com. Check out my stuff over at the 813.tv. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you want to become a Locked On Bucs insider, go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes to become an insider today. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding day. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. Want to thank you so much for joining us right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.